Sun Life Financial is proud to partner with Canadian HR Reporter and Thomson Reuters on the following roundtable, which takes an in-depth look at disability management. Sun Life is committed to working with Canadian employers to help optimize the physical, mental, and financial health of employees and to support your organization in maintaining a healthy, engaged workforce. For more information, visit www.sunlife.ca.
Disability claims pose a major challenge for employers, with stress and mental health issues forcing a lot of workers off the job. Canadian HR Reporter recently hosted a roundtable in partnership with Sun Life Financial to look at some of the issues around disability management. We wanted to explore the reasons for rising disability claims and find out where employers and employees can turn for help. In this video, the fourth of a 7-part series, panelists talk about personalized medicine options currently available in the mental health space.
So pharmacogenetics or pharmacogenomics, depending on if you're talking about the entire genome or a specific gene, is a strategy whereby a swab test is done in the patient's mouth. Genetic material, deoxyribonucleic acid, the DNA piece, is sent to a lab. It's run through a process called PCR, polymerase chain reaction, which is quite complicated, but at the end of the day extremely important because it magnifies the amount of genetic material. And then basically what's done is that DNA is compared to a list of known contraindications for drug utilization based upon how that patient's DNA and the genes that they have, primarily in the liver for metabolism of drugs, break down drugs through a metabolic pathway. And so certain drugs will allow you to be processed quicker than others. So the best example I think of, and I use this all the time when I speak on this topic, is caffeine. So if you are somebody who can drink a cup of coffee in the morning and feel great, have another cup at lunch or another cup late in the day, and still go to bed without any issues at all, you're what's known as a rapid metabolizer of one particular drug, and that's caffeine. You contrast that with people who have to stop drinking coffee early in the morning because they can't get to sleep late at the day. So they're a slow metabolizer of one particular drug, and that drug is caffeine. And it's all based upon that gene that helps with the metabolic process in the liver. So the same thing happens with other drugs that don't happen to be caffeine, such as anxiolytics or antidepressants. So people who are quick metabolizers, fast metabolizers, they may be in a state whereby they don't have enough drugs in their system to have a to have a pharmacological effect over long periods of time. Contrast that to people who don't necessarily, who process very slowly, they may be in a state of having too much drug in their system and a higher therapeutic dose. Thereby it doesn't actually match what's going on. So at the end of the day, when the research is done to validate whether or not a drug works for a particular condition, you don't take into account the genetic profile of those individuals. What happens is these are huge population-based studies. You don't account for intergenetic variances, and you say, well, 80% of the population will respond according to this type of treatment, and then that's good enough to obtain approval, and it's safe. It doesn't cause any other contraindications. So at the end of the day, that's what the process is referred to. So it's relatively inexpensive when you compare it to the disability costs associated with wage loss replacement and other things. And as I noted before, 4 to 6 drugs people are going to try with regards to anxiolytics and antidepressants. So it's a way to leapfrog to the final drug that's going to have the best indication for treatment for one particular person.
We continue to see that the pharmaco is really not well understood again. Yeah. There is a huge benefit to that service and that feature, and we really need to actually continue to tout that and get the general practitioners on board with that, because if your personal doctor doesn't actually believe in it or even understand it, very difficult
or
to
even
go
know
there.
it exists. And at the end of the day, if you're prescribing anxiolytics or antidepressant drugs, it's going to take you between 4 and 6 drugs to find one that works, assuming that you want pharmacological treatment. Of course, the best practice would be to use cognitive behavioral therapy in addition to diet and exercise, which has the same efficacy as antidepressants or anxiolytics at the end of the day. But that's a different point altogether. One thing I would make about Paula's notion on the impact of high-functioning folks with depression is, at the end of the day, in Canada, 77% of people with depression are actually engaged in the workforce. So this is people with mild to moderate depression. And with about 1.3 million Canadians, or a point prevalence of about 4% of the population, these are sizable numbers dealing with these instances. So at the end of the day, there's enough critical mass in there for us to really recognize that something needs to be done and really shift that conversation much towards prevention. Yeah.
I do want to go back. Mike, you might have noticed when you were talking about pharmacogenomics, I was nodding my head like crazy, because I think it's underestimated how important the issue is that intervention solves. The normal course when somebody has depression is that they're typically suffering for a long period of time before they get to the point when they reach out for help. So almost always it's a little bit later than optimum. So the individual does reach out for help, maybe even a little earlier because of the lack of stigma, but it's still too late. They reach out for help. They might go to a physician. The physician might prescribe something for them, and then it doesn't work, or it actually causes adverse symptoms. That has put that person way back, actually further back than when they had started, because they were hoping that this would actually be an action, reaching out for help would solve the situation, and the opposite happens. If they happen to go off work, there's this whole cycle of, well, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. Well, the change doesn't happen to try another medication right away. Usually it extends, there's a second medication tried, another medication. So the hopelessness for the individual increases, the length of time increases, which actually exacerbates, all symptoms, the isolation, et cetera, and makes it more likely for them to stay off work. They are getting worse, social relationships are being damaged. So all of that just has a compounding effect. So if you take the other path, which is the person reaches out for help, they are appropriately tested. They do get that genetic testing to see which medications they will metabolize appropriately and which that they won't. They're put on a medication that does work for them. Their symptoms reduce to the point where they're able to actually have benefit from behavioral therapy or other things, and they may never go off work. It's very different paths. So, you might have thought I was a little dramatic in painting this. I actually wasn't dramatic enough in showing the separation of those paths.